Winter feed costs are one of the biggest barriers to profitability that any ranch faces. Today on the Working Cows podcast, we're going to talk to Stefan Bouw, and he is east of the 100th meridian and north of the Canadian border, so he knows a thing or two about winter. We're going to talk to him about the different things they've tried over the years.
It's been a couple years since we winter bale grazed, so it's probably around 15 years ago that we started. So that's saying that ground that was bale grazed 15 years ago, I can still see improvement.
We'll talk to him about new strategies that they're trying currently and some of the challenges that they faced with the different strategies they've tried.
Grazing standing corn. So thought that's going to be extremely easy for a cow, so I better leave the calves on. So the calves stayed on till about first week of March. But yeah, so then we grazed that standing corn, and overall I liked it, but I didn't like when the calves would push through the fence and then the cows would eventually follow them.
We'll also talk about the benefits to the bottom line and profitability that they've found through some of the different strategies that they've implemented over the years.
When we went to grazing everybody together for the winter, so the calves and the bred heifers and the cows, the decrease in workload was incredible.
All that and more on this episode 415 of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by the Patreon supporters and K-Rose Company.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios. And today, it's my pleasure to welcome back Stefan Bouw. He is one of the brothers there at Edie Creek Ranch and Edie Creek Angus, and they've got a bull sale coming right up. And we'll talk to him more about that on this episode as well. But we had some conversation during some bonus content that was released exclusively at patreon.com/workingcows. And I was like, that is really helpful things that they've been thinking about and experimenting with. And I said, let's make that into a whole episode in itself. And so here we are having this conversation today about winter feeding strategies that drive profitability. And I wanted to let you know also that we are continuing to produce fresh content more than weekly recently for the Patreon supporters at patreon.com/workingcows. So if you are interested in it, we usually try to shoot for about 10 minutes per episode released of bonus content produced. So usually could be something totally different. Like last time we talked to Jonathan and Stefan about something other than winter feeding, but we talked about winter feeding in the course of their bonus content. And so it can be something totally unrelated to the episode subject. It might be a deeper dive on a particular nugget from within the episode subject, but it is about 10 minutes per episode, and we're going to cross, Lord willing, we're going to cross over 200 episodes of bonus content released, and some of those have just been full recordings of sessions from conferences that I've attended. I know some of them have been over an hour of post-episode discussion, so lots of bang for your buck. I don't care if you subscribe for 1 month, download all 200 back episodes, or at this point 172, I think it is, back episodes, download all those and unsubscribe the next month. If it's not for you, that's fine. But check it out at patreon.com/workingcows. Now for my conversation with Stefan Bouw. Stefan, thanks for joining me again on the Working Cows podcast. Welcome back.
Thanks, Clay. Really enjoy that you're having me back here, and looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, this conversation kind of grew out of a little bonus content we recorded last time you were on, and we talked about some of the things that you guys are doing winter grazing there. For those who don't know, you're in Manitoba, not too far north of the border. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's about an hour and a half south.
Okay. So, but obviously winter comes and winter stays, and managing winter feed costs is going to be a big part of you guys being profitable. So yeah, talk to me about some of the things that you guys have been thinking about as far as how to maintain a profitable operation while managing winter feed costs in a challenging environment.
Yeah, it's like you said, when winter comes, it stays here. We do enjoy the fact that we don't go through a lot of, thawing and freezing like some of our folks further south there. So we enjoy that. That allows us to do some different things. Um, when I think about winter grazing, I think about it sort of like how Ranching for Profit talks about setting your profit goals first and then building backwards from there. So I like to try to do that when we think about our winter grazing and how we're going to get our cows through winter, because that's just the best way to try to achieve the things we're wanting to get after. Um, so some of those goals that we're trying to set is improving health or of the soil. Is that going to be possible with the practice that we're going to be doing? And are our cows getting to exercise, and are they working hard for us, or are we just handing them their feed? Like our cows right now, they probably travel about a half a mile one way for water. Keeps them in good shape. Calving is going to be easy in that kind of condition.
I think that's a one of those paradigm challenging thought processes that kind of, I think actually Dawn Natto helped kind of solidify that for me when I was talking to her. And she said that when she first met Bud Williams, she was working at a feed yard, and he said, "You give me this pen of cattle, you guys take that pen of cattle. You're responsible for how they're managed. I'm responsible for how these guys are managed." And he was taking those cows out, those yearlings or whatever they were, feeder cattle, out and taking them for a walk every day. And they're thinking, oh, you're burning energy, you're going to be, walking the pounds off of them and all those kinds of things. And in the end, they, as you would guess, right, they performed better. And so I think that's part of it, is thinking about, well, first of all, how are they performing? But then also, like you said, are they in shape for calving? Because that's obviously a strenuous activity. And so you want them to be in good shape to do it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we've been keeping the calves on a little longer, so that's a little more work for them. But I think it's a doable thing if you can manage to give them enough nutrition to get through winter like that. It just you need to take a look at the overall picture of what we're getting these animals to do and how they can help on the operation, and including their health and the profit that we're getting out of them. But not that being the only goal, but it's certainly a super important part of what we're doing. For the grazing side of it, I know sometimes we get stuck in paradigms of, oh, if we leave it out there, they're not going to get to utilize all of it. But if I would just cut it and bale it and bring it home, I can get them to eat, 95% of it in a bale ring. But there is a real cost to making that feed. And when I think about it here, it's probably somewhere around $30 a bale for us to make a bale of, especially wrap bales for silage. And then you got to feed it back out to them. Well, you can waste quite a bit of feed, or at least leave quite a bit of feed behind when we're winter grazing, when we don't have to cover that cost of the harvesting. There's not a custom chopper coming in that you got to pay 10,000 to chop it or whatever that thing is. So I'm just saying there is some value there, of costs you don't have to cover. So if you don't get everything licked up, I'm not saying we want to leave a whole bunch behind, but and if you do, you can come back in the spring and try to regraze some of that. But it's certainly not that we have to get it all harvested up and fed to them. So.
Yeah, right. That's I think that's another one of those paradigms of efficiency versus effectiveness. Like, you can be 100% efficient, but you might not be very effective, or you might sacrifice other things that you want to accomplish along the way. Is that kind of in line with what you're thinking about there?
Yeah, for sure. And it's all the easy, it's really easy to see when you harvest the feed and they clean up that bale, and like that's a very quantifiable thing, but it's really hard, it's harder to do the math of what did it cost you to bring that home, and what does it cost you to haul it back out to the field in terms of manure. And I know when I run numbers, when we grow kind of cover crop blends, if I'm harvesting all that feed and feeding it back out to them in terms of bales, or you could be chopped silage too, it's sort of a break-even crop. It's not a profitable thing. I'm not saying that that's taking into consideration what we're doing for the soil, but the only way that I do that or we do that and make a little money on is if we graze it. So either I have to have a regrowth that comes and we graze, or we just, don't take any cuts and we leave it standing and we'll graze that in the late fall. And that's where there is some profit growing those types of crops for us, is if we get the cows to do the harvesting for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key, right? And I mean, it's going to help in other ways, right? If they're doing the harvesting, then you're going to have fewer needs in terms of the equipment that is required to do that harvesting and all of the other things we've talked about, right? The hauling off, the hauling back out, the feeding, all those things. Just think of all the steps that are saved. I mean, that's been one of the things that just continually baffles me is in conventional agriculture, I mean, it's just diesel upon diesel upon diesel to, cut the feed, to bale it, to row it, stack it, haul it, move it, feed it,
right.
Process it, feed it. It just never ends. It's just a constant cycle. And all the while, you got these animals out there with 4 feet that they can move long ways and go find their own food, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they don't get stuck either, typically. They do pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of that equipment side of it, the way I look at sort of the 10-year cattle cycle roughly is a lot of operations take those couple of good years we get and have to reinvest quite a bit into the equipment that's been sort of, a little bit run down over those leaner years where we didn't have money to spare on some improvements there. So if we can try to reduce our equipment needs so that in the good years that we're currently in, we can invest that in something that isn't a depreciating asset, we're just going to be more profitable. I'm not saying that you can't use equipment and that equipment can be a good investment and can make you more efficient and more profitable. So I'm not saying you can't use it, but certainly the least amount that we can use between the cow and its feed will make us more profitable. And just my personality, I'm much happier not fixing or working a piece of equipment. I'd rather just have a little more time spent with the cows and moving them daily is how we do it. And you need to sit, in an office or somewhere when it's not the moment you need to decide if you're making that feed or not, and you need to make a plan, right? Like it's hard when the sun's shining and that crop's ready to harvest or looks ready. If you don't have a plan, it's pretty hard to get around not harvesting that crop, right? So planning out the winter and knowing that, no, this is when we're going to get the cows to eat it and that's going to work out is really useful and really can help you to make changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a huge part of it. And, another one of those pieces of equipment that tends to be a part of many of these kinds of operations is the chemical equipment, and having the chemical inputs and then the equipment to do that, applying those kinds of things. And are you able to get away from some of that in this with this kind of management?
Yeah, we certainly try to, and we try to use the cattle, and we also just don't need totally weed-free fields is a different mindset too, right? So we are doing some corn grazing, and we do use conventional corn to do that. We were organic for just about 20 years, so like 2000 to 2020. So certainly for us, spraying is not, and even fertilizer is not something that we like doing or want to depend on. So trying to do practices to do the least amount of that as we can is certainly important to us.
Yeah. Can you define that term conventional corn? Because I wonder if that gets used in multiple ways.
Yeah, I just learned that a couple of years ago. And as far as I know, it means that it's non-GMO.
Right.
So it does not have the Roundup Ready gene in it.
Right.
That's the kind of corn that we've been using.
Right. And to me, conventional means what everybody else is already doing. And so conventional to me would be Roundup Ready, and totally. Unconventional would be not Roundup Ready, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that's great. I had to do the same thing when I first was trying to hear that properly.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, the K-Rose Company. Looking to make your next bull sale a bigger success? K-Rose Company has been helping ranchers like you grow their business for years with cutting-edge marketing strategies that get results. They understand your work, and they're here to help you maximize your potential. Their bull sale marketing guide is packed with actionable tips and proven tactics to elevate your marketing efforts and boost your sales. Don't miss out on this free resource. Visit workingcows.net/415 and download your copy today. K-Rose Company, your partner in ranching success. Yeah, so let's move on. Just talk a little bit about kind of the way that your management in the summertime affects what you're doing for the winter grazing, because I think that's part of it too. We're managing holes here, and you're a lot of times the same landscape is going to be used in multiple seasons. So how are you managing your summers to set you up for winter?
Yeah, for sure. It starts with thinking about the species that you're gonna grow together, and when they would be ready to be harvested. And for our family, we like going camping for a week in August. And so if I can try to grow something that's not going to need to be harvested around that week, you never know. It can be a slow summer and low heat, and so there's no guarantees, but at least if we put it on the calendar and we try to do things in a way that will get us there, you have a chance of making it work. So if it's not on the calendar, and if it's not a goal that you have, it's so super easy just to forget about it and to not hit that target. Even just making hay, is that cheap hay that you're baling all summer long, is that worth it? Is there something else that you could do with your time that would be a little more profitable? And just because you could make that bale for a little cheaper than you can buy it, it might not pencil out that that's the best way to spend your entire summer. And then when you do get to when you do some prioritizing of family, it's sort of trying to make it the whole picture, like you were saying, a healthy thing, and something that the kids will enjoy, and there's room for them, and it's not that my kids enjoy getting on a tractor or driving the truck. That's super, they love that. So I'm not saying that that's not a fun place to be, but if we're taking all our time on that equipment, there can probably be some, would like to see some other things happening in a summertime when the sun's shining and it's nice to be out swimming somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to where you started. When we think about what is our profit for, we can define that word profit in more ways than just monetary, right? More than just economics and finance. Exactly. Part of our profit is having margin in our schedule to go out and hit the lake when it's in August, when it's decent and when you want to be there. And so then you having a goal that's written down on paper that includes that influences what we plant, influences when and where we graze, and some of those things, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that having some margin in all areas of the operation is certainly helpful and reduces burnout. And when we're maxed out, we're going through really, there are some seasons where it's just you can't, there's a drought and you can't do anything but run hard, every day to get through that hard time. So some of this is going to sound probably to folks like it's a luxury, right? Oh, you can think about time off, or you can think about soil health, or and there's some stages of life where that does not seem like a possibility. But if you can get to be in the spot and making goals so that so that you can get there, it's helpful. And so having margin is super important for, in the people and in our land. We don't want to max out the land. We don't want to max out our cattle. And even in the line of equipment, if it's always on its last leg and needs to be repaired and we can't do anything efficiently, that's a really tough place to run an operation.
And speaking of running hard, maxed out, you right now are, we're talking on Monday before a bull sale on Saturday. Am I right?
Yeah, that's totally accurate. Yeah.
And this will be released on the Friday before that bull sale. So go ahead and just talk a little bit about that, about the bull sale and some of what you guys have coming up there.
Oh, sure. We be our 18th Edie Creek Angus sale on Saturday here. We sell 2-year-old bulls. There's red and black Angus bulls. They're mostly blacks. There's about 50 to 55 bulls in the sale this year. Look forward to it. It's now, we hold it at home. Most of our customers bid online on Team Auction, I think is the site's name. You can go to our website, the Edie Creek Angus website, to find all the links to get there and videos for all the bulls. But yeah, that's just coming up here on Saturday.
Yep. And we'll have links to that in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/415, workingcows.net/415. You can find links to what's going on there at Edie Creek. And we were talking a little bit beforehand. I got a question this week about places I'd go to look for bulls, and your name came up, and they said, well, how does that work getting bulls out of Canada? So can you run me through that just real quick?
Yeah, for sure. So we've certainly sent bulls south across the border. There's just a little extra health work that our vets have to do. We need to, once we know the state they're going to, each state has a little bit different requirements, but that's up to our vet to figure out. So there's a little bit of cost there. I think we charge $250 Canadian for doing that extra health work. The American dollar is very strong, and so if you are buying with American dollar, you do have something close to a 30% discount on buying bulls at our sale. So that's something that often our American customers don't realize, and are very glad to find out when we talk about it. But yeah, it's not a big deal. Trucking, you got to figure out trucking. Maybe that's not the most straightforward thing, but it's always been doable, and we've got the bulls where they got to go. So
yep. Yeah, does it often work out where somebody that's kind of close, North, South Dakota, Minnesota, that they might just drive up and pick it up? Is that possible and doable?
Yeah, there's been some of that. There's also a trucking company we've worked with in Canada that just does basically bull deliveries as a business. Huh. So they just have routes, and other guys' bulls on the truck, and it works out pretty well. And getting them out earlier in terms of heading south, that those trucks go more often earlier in the season.
Sure.
So if we're waiting until June, that gets a bit harder to get those trucks figured out. But
sure. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that clarity, but I mean, it plays into what we're talking about today too, because these are bulls from working cows. These are bulls from cows that, like you said, we want cows that work for us, not ones that we're just taking hand feeding every day. And so that's the kind of bulls that you guys are developing there. And this winter grazing subject is probably the biggest missing piece of that in most bull development scenarios. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure. That it's really hard to sort through cattle if their life has been just extremely easy and handed to them. So that's kind of been our best tool for us, is making the cattle work and letting the environment sort them and just multiplying those animals. So we try to have as many teenage cows in our pedigrees as we can, and keep herd bulls that have a couple of teenage cows up close in the pedigree. And those are teenage cows that did go out and graze for the winters, and they're not pampered to get to that place. They had to have inherent fertility and longevity. So yeah, we're definitely trying to use the environment and grazing out in the winter or whatever we can do, and even some of our summer rotation too, to put some pressure on the cattle and see who are adapted.
Yep. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I don't remember who it was, but they said, somebody told me you're either going to feed for fertility or you're going to breed for fertility. And I hadn't heard that before, and I thought that was good. And that's kind of what you guys are doing there, is challenging them by making them go out, even in the summer, maybe probably, I'm guessing, some higher density grazing, to challenge them a little bit, but challenging them to make sure they're fertile animals that don't need to be fed every bite of food that they get throughout at least the winter, for sure.
Yeah. And one a while ago, Burke Tykert came to Manitoba and did a talk, and I was talking to him, and his number one important thing, if you're trying to improve, or for even just keeping replacement heifers, his question was, was the bull you're using born in the first cycle? So that's something that we put in our catalog, is this bull born in the first cycle, and the age of the dam and the weight of the dam. It's just sort of that there's a super big focus on the cow if you're trying to improve your cow herd. So why not get some information about that, and why not make that the tool for the bull to improve your cow herd?
Yeah, for sure. So talk to me about some of the strategies that you guys have used over the years in terms of winter feeding.
So the one that we did probably the longest would be bale grazing. We probably did that for about 12 years. The cow herd was grain free for that entire time, just ate the bales. We can see today improvement in all the ground that we have bale grazed on still. And I'd say it's been a couple years since we winter bale grazed, so it's probably around 15 years ago that we started. So that's saying that ground that was bale grazed 15 years ago, I can still see improvement. It's not the same as when it was, year 3, 4, 5 after bale grazing, but it's certainly an amazing effect that the bale grazing has. It's overall a good life for a cow. It's very peaceful, and we kind of did them week at a time moves, because we couldn't ever buy enough hay that was equal quality to give a bunch of, say 2-3 weeks of hay at once. So we would have, like basically straw quality in a row, and, first cut hay and some second cut, say. And so if I'd have given them that whole pot of bales, they would have eaten all the second cut first, all the first cut first, and then all the straw bales last, right? And that wouldn't work out. So we had to meter it out. But that's okay. All you're doing is moving a wire. So either we took a snowmobile or a quad if the snow wasn't too deep. And yeah, that was good. One thing I would say, that you still have to pay attention to the feed quality. We should have done a better job in our earlier years paying attention to that. The hay that we were bale grazing had kind of been pre-washed a few times before it got baled up, and that made for some pretty poor quality hay for cows in our harsh winters to get through. So that did put a sort on our cow herd, and we got left with the cow herds that work. The cow families that work. But I'm just saying, you still got to pay attention to what you're putting out there, and that it's a good enough plain nutrition for them.
Winter environment, droughts, those things can be challenging when you're looking at buying 2/3 of the hay that you're gonna be putting out there in a good year. then that becomes a challenge when you hit a drought, and some of those things start to maybe shift the way that you look at how you're going to approach feeding in the winter. Is that right?
Yeah, that is completely accurate. We felt that back in our really dry years around 2021. Hay was $200 a bale, and what we were only producing 1/3 of the hay we needed, and we're buying the rest, and those acres were just producing maybe 10% of what our normal production was. So there just wasn't feed, right? Like all we had was straw. Our neighbors were letting us bale straw, and we were super thankful for that. But that's all we had going into winter, basically, because we couldn't afford to buy $200 a bale bales for bale grazing. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, no doubt. What were some of the lessons you learned regarding bale grazing, or some of the insights over that number of years of bale grazing that maybe challenge even the paradigm of the paradigm challengers?
Yeah, it's a funny thing when you're in it. Like we hadn't done anything different for over a decade, and so you really believe in it. When you get outside, like so now we're not bale grazing, and you take some harder look at things, right? Because you're being a little more honest with ourselves. And one challenge I find when I think about it is, it's not actually a really great cycle of nutrients, right? Like I'm not even sure that it's you can we really consider it to be fully regenerative? It totally is regenerative for the land that the bale grazing happens, but if I'm buying in 2/3 of my hay and a farmer is mining their hay ground and has to replace those nutrients, and we're just trucking that over to our place or to your place or whoever it is, that's not a healthy cycle. So there's some challenge there to me to try to figure out how to make that so that big picture it works out. But yeah, that's just sort of a funny thing because we always talk about bale grazing as being so good for the land and it's good for the cattle, and it is. It's just the big picture there. There's a hole that I think happens for the producer that's making the hay.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I know Jeremy Sweeten has talked about that very thing and said that, he does some different things when he's putting up hay to make sure that his hay cutter does pass the 6 principles of soil health, but that's him being intentional about it. Whereas if you're just trying to get every ton off of every acre, then maybe you're not going to pay attention to some of those pieces. So I appreciate that. I am bale grazing currently, but
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be doing some in the spring again. So it's
Right.
not that we don't none.
right, and that's I say it, probably said it too many times, but it's the fastest way to improve ground really slowly.
Sure, yeah.
The where you do it, it's going to be the best that ground has been in a long time, and it'll be that way for a long time. But you can only do it on a very small area, and we've thought and kicked around the idea of bringing in up to 300 cows at a time during the winter to bale graze,
Yep.
just so you could cover more acres to do it, because it makes such a huge difference after that. So yeah, certainly. And go ahead.
And I was just going to say, in those dry years, like the places where we bale graze, they're really, in a good year, there's more grass, but in a dry year, there's way more grass. Eventually, we did get to the place where everything just ran out of water. So it didn't matter if your organic matter was super high to retain water. But yeah, overall, it's a super improver of our soils.
With that, you've moved on. It's not the main practice. It's not the bread and butter, so to speak. What are you guys doing now?
Back to those dry years when the hay was $200 a bale, I looked at growing some corn because that was, our neighbors were growing annuals. They're still having, maybe 50% or better production because an annual is just so much more efficient at using water than perennials. And so I had to respect that, and it was just too dry for our perennials to do well. So we sprayed out a hay field, and without working it up, we seeded corn straight into it. Another field was a field that was worked, and we put corn into that. And to be honest, in the drought where we put the corn in the hay field, the perennials had used up the water so much that there was no water left for the corn, and that was a complete write-off of a field. The field that we had been doing some annuals on still grew an 8-ton crop of corn. So it's not a great, but it's a lot better than 0 or 1 ton an acre. So anyways, that was back in our very driest ever, like 1 in 100 years dry. Since then, we still grow, we'll seed into more soddy kind of fields, and that works fine. First year we did corn, we chopped it and bale grazed straw, and then fed corn out silage along a fence line, so a hot wire, so the cows kind of line up like they're on a bunk. So that was our first going into growing some corn silage. And then from there, we tried grazing standing corn. So I thought that's going to be extremely easy for a cow, so I better leave the calves on. So the calves stayed on until about the first week of March. We actually weaned them, and then they got themselves back out. So it was like the week of the bull sale to re-wean the calves. So that was a bit hectic. But yeah, so then we grazed that standing corn, and overall I liked it, but I didn't like when the calves would push through the fence and then the cows would eventually follow them, and cows would move themselves on empty stomachs, and we'd see some, cows that were coming lame for for overeating on grain, right? So the way we were moving the cows at that time was we'd fill them up full of hay or forage in some way. So, and then by about 4 o'clock on that day one, we'd let them into a 1 or 2 acre piece of corn, standing corn. And then by day 3, we put straw bales in rings. And that was kind of our measure to say, once the straw bales are eaten, they're ready for their next move. So it's sort of a 3-day rotation is how we did that standing corn grazing. And overall it works. Like it's a tool, but I thought could be some improvement if I could make it so that they couldn't choose the grain out of that grazing system. So then that kind of got us to where we are this winter and last winter, which was we chopped and dropped corn about the first week of December. So the thought was, I saw it back in 2019 in the fall. Folks here didn't get to chop their corn until freeze up, and they made those piles, and the piles never ensiled. It stayed frozen all winter. So my thought was, well, if we can wait till the corn's frozen and we can chop it with a chopper and just drop little piles all over the field, and it's kind of like bale grazing, right? Because there's little piles all over, and but it's corn again. So we tried that. The downfall I've seen with that is the ground actually heats up the corn. About 3 to 4 weeks after we chopped it this winter, the pile started to heat from the ground up. So thankfully we were already, at least halfway through eating the field. It wasn't like it was the whole thing. But I sure don't like seeing that, and I sure don't like feeding that to the cattle. So either I got to figure out a way to have the piles even smaller so that there's less insulation to allow the ground to warm up, or I got to chop it later so the ground is more frozen. But if you get a good snowfall, the ground's not going to freeze, as it takes a long time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the experimentation. Just continuing to kind of innovate and try new things. And do you have a sense of what you might do in the future, or what do you? I mean, you're still kind of in the thick of it, but
the other thing we're doing actually right now is the cows are grazing a pile, like a 300-ton pile of silage, with just a hot wire in front of it. So we've opened up both ends, and they're eating off of both ends of the pile. So that we got into that because 2022 we made too much feed, and so we just stored a pile of feed for an extra year. So I did that again in 2023. So anyways, this is a 2-year-old pile that they're grazing. I like it overall. You make a high quality feed. It's chopped when it's still green and all that. But the nutrients are just not dispersed properly, right? Because you're really pretty intense there grazing that pile. So what we're going to do down the road, I'm not exactly sure. I might go back to trying bale grazing straw and then supplementing what they need to get enough energy and protein through the winter. But I could also go back to trying grazing standing corn, but wean the calves so that they're not going through the fences on us. That could be something else. But yeah, the answer is I don't know where we're going to go.
Yeah, but you've got goals that can kind of guide you and help you get where you want to be, and you never, I mean, that's one good thing. You're not locked into anything. You can just keep on kind of tweaking and finding the right thing that works for you guys, right?
And one other thing I didn't say about that switch was when we went to grazing everybody together for the winter, so the calves and the bred heifers and the cows, everybody's together, the decrease in workload was incredible for the farm. Like when you don't have a group here, right? Heifer calves, bull calves, bred heifers, everybody was together. It was like we sold, 60% of the herd, or, it's just, it's different than that but anyways, it was just such an improvement. So we still got to see where we can keep that going. Cause I enjoy, December being a little quieter and through Christmas and yeah, now we wean calves in January, but, there's a huge decrease in workload if you can keep cattle together in one group.
Yeah, again, that's one of those things that you get your mindset shifted and you start to think, well, if I'm, it's almost as easy to feed 100 cows or 500 cows as it is to feed one, if you're going to do,
Exactly.
or, whatever that number is in reality. But if you're going to feed them with a processor of some kind, or a feed wagon of some kind, that the upper limit of how many cows it's easier to feed, is pretty high.
Yeah, there's only so many hours in a day, right? That machine can get that work done. And like we bought a Jeep, an old 2000, I want to say, Jeep that's got big tires on it, and it was dirt cheap. And that's our winter quad, so I'm not actually outside at minus 25 or 35 and moving wire. That's the goal anyways, if that thing starts properly. Yeah, so you can do a little bit of investment, and it's not that expensive to try to make that side of life a little more enjoyable too.
What are some of the kind of infrastructure pieces that make this work, or some of the ways that you guys have overcome the environmental challenges of building fence in the winter months? What are some of the ways that you guys have dealt with those challenges?
Yeah, one of them is just having a really strong fencer in the summer, so cattle just have a really high respect for the fence. We do pretty much everything with single strand hot wires. So, right now the fencer is a little low that these cows are bale grazing the pile with, but I haven't had any trouble yet. So I should really get out there and find out what's going on, and we will. But so yeah, just make sure they have a high respect for electricity if you're going to do single wire grazing. We use lifters, poly lifters that we put over T-posts so that we have gates anywhere. That's a handy tool. So you're not, confined to have to go back a half mile to the gate to get to the other side, so then if you have fields that are adjacent to each other, you can, graze through one side to the other really easily. I bought some fiberglass posts from Premier One Supply this winter so that when I'm setting up a fence, it's just a drill one hole, put the fiberglass post in there, and it's way easier than using the double-footed Gallaghers. Those double-footed Gallaghers, if you want to put those in and double drill holes, that's more sturdy, but I had no trouble with using those fiberglass, and they're cheap and great. Does that kind of cover what you...
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. What about any particular mixes or cover crops that you find yourself going back to over and over again?
I don't know if I could say that we go back to over and over again. We did try a little more sorghum, probably lean a little more to millet in the end. We had really, 6 foot tall sorghum that didn't turn out that great. And that was only 1 year, so it's hard to say, right? I really do like having, we did a 15 species blend behind my house here this last year, and the regrowth was, so we silage that first cut and then we graze off the regrowth, and that is incredible feed for a cow. Like, for us anyways, winter is a time where our cows kind of have to put on some weight. Our summer grass is really washy. I've been talking a lot about wet years, but we're back to having moisture. I've been talking a lot about dry years, but we're back to having some moisture now. So our grass is quite washy, and overall our cows need to, so putting some weight on in the fall is all I'm saying is really handy. Yeah, those cover crop blends are really nice to graze for that.
Yeah, because you guys are straight north of what in the States?
Basically Grand Forks, okay. North Dakota.
So eastern. I mean, you're in the east. You're getting a little bit more moisture probably than the western provinces.
Yep.
So
I would say.
Yep. So you do get the washier grass, so you need that cow to be able to gain weight in the winter, right? Is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's sure different everywhere. I've done some road trips and we've seen a lot of operations, and it's amazing how different everybody's situation is. Like some of this conversation we're having about growing these cover crops, you go to places where there's no way you're going to have enough moisture to grow that,
Yep.
Everybody's got their own unique challenges. And yeah, we're just trying to figure out what we can do and what'll work here, and profitability too. Like we talked earlier about setting goals. One of the thing, you ask a guy, what does it cost to feed your cow, or what's your goal? It's like, well, as cheap as possible. Well, it's actually really hard to do as cheap as possible if we don't know numbers, right? Like, what does it actually cost you now? And what can we do to tweak the ration to get it cheaper? And what's the goal? Is it $1.75 is your wintering goal? Like that'd be pretty good, right? Like you hear higher and lower numbers, so don't pick on the number, but
right.
Setting that stuff out and knowing what you're actually spending now is really the only way to improve that profitability that you're trying to get to.
I appreciate that, Stefan. I appreciate the time and the thought you put into this. Really, really helpful look at some of the different things you guys have tried for winter grazing. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's always fun. And these are challenges that we put in front of ourselves when we try new things. But I hope some folks can learn from it. And if they've got suggestions for me too, they could always reach out and tell me where we're missing the boat or where something we could try too.
Very good. Stefan, thanks for your time today.
No problem. Thank you, Clay.
Very good stuff. Really appreciate the thought and preparation that Stefan put into that, and just his perspective and the fact that they're continuing to experiment and try new things and not get locked into anything and tweak and continue to iterate until they find something that works really well. And so very much appreciate his perspective. Coming up next on the Working Cows podcast, we're going to be talking to Preston Cave. And Preston has been using drone technology for a couple of years in some really interesting ways. It's unlocked new landscapes there in North Carolina where it's very rugged terrain, a lot of elevation gain and loss, a lot of up and down, a lot of steep mountain terrain. And the drone technology has helped them access a lot of those acres that they would not have been able to access otherwise. And we're also going to talk to him about how they used drone technology in some relief efforts, some hurricane relief efforts. So look forward to sharing that with you coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.